Um, my, my name is James Austin, and I'm one of the directors here at Cohesion. You can always tell the relevance of an event by the number of people who are sort of registered to attend and attending. So it's great to see so many people joining with us this morning. So welcome to all the new guests, and also the more familiar names and faces. Great to see you joining with us as well. So thank you for taking the time out of your days to sort of join us this morning. As ever, a little bit of housekeeping first of all. If I know everyone after the last 18 months or so is sort of are sort of webinar veterans, but if everyone can put their device or their laptop on mute, I think it'll just make a smoother process. And in terms of the structure for this morning, we're going to spend about 45 minutes listening to the various speakers, and I'm going to introduce those to you in a minute. And then, as ever, we'll have sort of 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the session to hopefully answer any questions and open the floor to sort of comments and thoughts. So if you're able to, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box down on the side. And if sort of more specific, if you'd like to put who you'd like to address your question to, and then we can put those to the speakers at the end. So really excited to hand over to our speakers who are going to share in turn their thoughts and insight. First of all, we've got Becky from UCAS. Becky's spoken with us before, so great to have you back here today this morning, Becky. UCAS, I think, has always been known as the entry point into higher education. And I'm not going to steal her thunder, I'm trying not to steal her thunder, but UCAS are going on a really exciting journey at the moment where they're making big inroads into the sort of school leaver and further education demographic as well. And Becky will be sharing some data and information and trends about what we're seeing, and I suppose more the sort of macroeconomic level. So, so first it will be Becky, then we're going to hand over to Amy Sutcliffe. Amy's joining us as the events lead at UTC Reading, which is a secondary school shockingly in Reading. And Amy's going to be sharing her thoughts and insight from the perspective of a school and the teachers, and I suppose the community within that school. So really looking forward to hearing Amy's thoughts with us this morning as well. And then lastly, we're going to hand over to Natalia. Natalia is the early talent lead at Virgin Media. Last year, Cohesion managed a huge school outreach campaign to over 1,500 schools across the country on behalf of Virgin Media. And Natalia will be sharing with us why Virgin Media chose to do a school outreach program, why it's so important to them, obviously the lessons learned, and also critically the results that we've now seen off the back of that. So looking forward to hearing her thoughts and perspectives from a hiring organisation. So before I hand over to Becky, I just thought I'd spend a couple of minutes just talking, I suppose, about what we're seeing in the industry and the perspective of Cohesion. So for those of you who are new to Cohesion, we are market specialists in early talent recruitment. So work across multiple markets and sectors, managing on behalf of our clients a variety of early talent programs. So historically, much of that has been centered around graduate recruitment and industrial placements and summer placements, etc. But increasingly, we're working more and more at a school leaver age. And I think this is a result of a lot of organizations who are wanting to start engaging with that community at an earlier level. COVID, as we all know, has had a significant impact on all early talent programs. But as a trend, if we look back 10, 15 years, the number of apprentices within the UK has been growing at a faster rate than graduates. So back in 2000, I think there were about 150,000 apprentices in the UK. There are now just over 500,000. So we've seen about a 400% increase in that time. But from our perspective, and I know some of the organisations we're working with, this is an area of the sort of demographics which is hugely overlooked by organisations. So typically, most organisational recruitment budgets are spent still on the graduate element and promoting opportunities at that sort of level, and not to the school leaver or apprenticeship level. So from the conversations we're having, we're noticing that there are typically two reasons why organisations are looking at school outreach programmes. I think originally the core reason was based around corporate social responsibility, or now ESG, environmental, social and governance. And the point of that was to provide skills and workshops, employability sessions, etc. And whilst this is still as relevant as ever, I think originally it was possibly the larger organisations that had the budgets and the resources to be able to sign off those sort of provisions. What we're seeing now, though, is organisations of all different sizes starting to appreciate that from a candidate engagement perspective, it can not only boost application numbers, but act as a really, really effective tool to drive increased diversity and social mobility within the applicant pool. And I think later on, Natalia is going to reference some of the results that we've seen. So school outreach campaigns can be targeted to engage not only with certain postcodes, so when we deliver a campaign, we can really zone in around the hiring organisation's town or area where they're recruiting, but we can also target schools with high free school meal percentages, which are obviously related and correlated to social deprivation, but can also target specific gender, ethnicity and diversity data. So when developing a programme through Cohesion and our partners, we've got the resources to really build a bespoke and specific programme that can not only target those specific areas and communities, but also give the candidates applying the support and help them transition from education into employment, and give a far more detailed and supportive approach than just putting jobs on job boards. So at the risk of sort of stealing everyone's thunder, I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker, Becky, who's going to show some of the data and trends that we're seeing from her perspective. So Becky, if I hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Firstly, I'll just introduce myself. So my name is Becky Hopwood. I'm head of sales at UCAS. I'm sure most of you are familiar with UCAS as the University and College Admissions Service. UCAS is a charity, it's not a government organisation, and UCAS supports over 700,000 students globally to apply to higher education every year. However, one of our strategic goals, which is part of our strategy for 2025, is to be the go-to place for post-18 choices. Each and every one of the students we engage with face a myriad of decisions, and they face many more as they progress on through HE and onto their career, and that landscape's only getting more complicated. It's UCAS's ultimate goal that people should have equal opportunity to access high quality, personalised and timely support to help them navigate that journey. I'm going to share with you today some research and some insight from our audience, specifically around the work we're doing in the apprenticeship space, within that early careers space. So I hope you'll find it useful when you start to think about early careers strategy and indeed engaging around social mobility. So first thing to say, and one really big trend, is that we are seeing in the younger audience of 16, 17-year-olds that interest in apprenticeships is increasing quite significantly. We currently sit on a database of about 800,000 learners who have not yet applied for university. So they're thinking about higher education for 2022 start or 2023. And about 50% of that audience have expressed an interest in apprenticeships, so they're considering an apprenticeship alongside potentially applying for university. Now, about 2 to 3 years ago, that was around 25 to 30%, so that really is quite a significant increase. And not only that, alongside the increased level of interest, there's also a demographic rise in the number of 18-year-olds in the UK. So that's increasing that demand even further. Not surprisingly, COVID has impacted apprenticeship availability over the last 18 months, and starts in 2020 were down compared to the same period in 2029, particularly sectors that were affected by lockdown, like transport and retail, for example. We are starting to see vacancies increase, and especially given the current volatility in the recruitment market. More and more employers and SMEs are starting to think about how they can benefit from building their talent pipeline and investing in early careers. Next slide, please, James. So At UCAS, we sit on a vast amount of data and insight, and we release a number of reports every year. In the last year, we've released 2, I think, that are particularly relevant for the audience on this webinar. One included a survey of about 27,000 students looking into factors that influence their choices school leavers make. And the second one looked at the journey to becoming an apprentice. So I'll share with you some highlights from both of those surveys. I'll also put links to those surveys in the chat so that people can go and read more information should they wish to. Firstly, to say, the HE recruitment and admission cycle gives students a massive amount of information to hone their choices based on course types, what a student life is like on and off campus, the quality of teaching, what they can expect from studying, the outcomes they can expect from studying. And advisors in schools are really well established at guiding students through the UCAS application process from as early as year 9. But there's not a comparable process for apprenticeships or for those learners who are looking to do something different. So it is more complicated and more time consuming for teachers and advisors in schools. Reputation of apprenticeships does continue to be an issue. In our research, we saw that only 8% of students surveyed associated apprenticeships with leading to a good job, and only 4% of students associated the word prestigious with apprenticeships, compared to 76% with a university degree. So there's still work to do around reputation of apprenticeships. Not only that, guidance and understanding the benefits is not clear. So 87% of learners think that a university degree is important to getting a job, compared to 57% for apprenticeships. So ultimately, what that means for employers and those working in the early careers space is that more needs to be done to articulate the benefits of an apprenticeship and make it really clear to potential applicants what the opportunities are for them. Information is hard to get. They're hungry for it. Next slide, please, James. Information is hard to get. They are massively hungry for it. That they're more interested to find out. There is more awareness of apprenticeships, and you can see from here that the student choices report indicated that 1/3 of students do not receive any information about apprenticeships from their school or college, and that's any information at all. The bar chart shows results from a survey we did back in February, and it shows a clear difference in access to information on apprenticeships versus university, with 1 in 5 indicating it was somewhat difficult or very difficult to get information about apprenticeships. We know teachers are working hard to inform and support students, but the Baker Clause, it's not being implemented consistently. And for us at UCAS, there's clearly an opportunity here to help support students and employers and sector bodies to help provide more comprehensive information and advice. We've got a clear ambition to act as almost a digital Baker Clause by working with partners, employers, stakeholders to improve our content research and outreach. One thing to say is that early engagement is crucial. So not only do this audience want more information, they're looking for it earlier. So pre-GCSE for 60%. The research indicated that the lower polar quintile groups, so those with the lowest participation rates in higher education, are being underserved. So it was 43% from polar quintile 1 report that they more information would have helped them make better choices, compared to 37% of those from polar quintile 5, so those more likely to go to higher education. Another finding from the research was that disadvantaged students are more likely to start thinking about post-18 choices later, which can have a knock-on effect and limit their choices, especially in more competitive subject areas. So this suggests that it's important for careers information, advice and guidance to be embedded early and perhaps as early as within primary education. So the school outreach we're talking about today really is important for those disadvantaged students. Some of the things that we're doing at UCAS to help support employers and provide more information for students. We are investing heavily in our information, advice and guidance across ucas.com to create that parity of visibility. We've recently launched a careers quiz that's linked to labour market data and can showcase different types of role to really aim to inspire career choices. And another way is that we're trying to help showcase employers and the opportunities available through employees by launching employer profiles. So it's proven across the marketplace that an employer profile is a highly effective method of engaging new talent, and it's an opportunity to showcase employers and what it's like to be part of that organisation and part of that team. They're completely free for employers and sit on ucas.com. So a great opportunity if you're looking to put your organisation in front of an engaged audience, considering their next steps. Don't know if we can move the slides on, please, James.
I'm trying to. That one?
Yeah, those are the employee profiles. And next one is, again, please, James. Okay, so what does this mean for employers when you're planning early career strategy and specifically thinking about those disadvantaged student groups? Our research indicates that when, next slide please, James, when advertising roles, the need for factual information came across strongly, as well as the reputation of both the employer and, if you're working with a training provider, the information about the university training provider, whoever that may be, must have a successful record and clear progression routes, talking about things like future earning potential, long-term career prospects, job security, in role profiles and job adverts is really important. It's important, to go back to tackling some of those reputational issues that really helps associate apprenticeship roles alongside the prestige of perhaps a university degree. However, the need for some of, next slide please, James, the need for some of those pastoral elements is also extremely high. You can see from the free text on this slide that students or potential candidates want to fit in. They want to feel part of a team. And this is much the same as we see with those applying for university. They want to essentially find their tribe or people like them within their role or at a university. COVID particularly has had an impact on that younger audience. They haven't had the support through school, and they're more hungry for detail and more reassurance. So talking about the recruitment process, how you support this, what is the onboarding process, how are the social engagements and well-being needs met and supported through the organisation through line managers, social meetings, lunches, mentors, etc., are really important, that they get a feel for what it's like to work as part of an organisation. The scarcity of information about that available within the apprenticeship market. You get quite a lot of it from universities, but not so much from employers. Students in this age group say they've got a high need for connection and group membership. They need to believe that they're going to make their friends for life if they take the apprenticeship route as well. Students don't think they can do apprenticeships abroad and believe they'll miss out on the opportunity to move away from home. So it's important to talk about perhaps some of the wider aspects of apprenticeship and encouraging relocation if that's an audience that you intend to reach. So in summary, what I've shared with you today is there is a mismatch in apprenticeship advice and demand, and UCAS want to do more in that space. Students and influencers are looking for information much earlier, and that's really important to help build the awareness, support the students and address the issues around reputation. More careers information, advice and guidance is needed. It needs to be personalised. It needs to be focused on those outcomes. It needs to think ahead towards career opportunities. And it's vital at all those decision-making points, but we need to think about what's right for potential candidates and tailor that messaging so you can support people going through that application process. Candidates across early careers, both apprenticeship and graduate, actually want reassurance, especially around the pastoral support. So it's really important to think about what you offer and how you promote that as part of your recruitment strategy. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into the audience and into UCAS and our ambitions into this space. As I mentioned, I'll share the links to the next report so that you can find them easily. If there's any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we can answer them at the end of today's webinar. But thank you very much.
Becky, thank you so much. I think that's fantastic, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think, you know, looking at the people who are joining the call today, you know, we're sort of heads of early talent and HR directors, etc. And you know, within our world, we're very familiar with the terminology and the acronyms and the sort of typical recruitment process, etc. And I think, you know, what we've always got to bear in mind is that we are in trying to engage with a community where this is their first foray, their first experience into hiring organizations. So really sort of breaking that content down, I think is hugely important. And I think what you've also highlighted here is there's this huge sort of expanse where very little is being done. So I think probably as an industry and for the organizations that are hiring and sort of industry in general, I think there's a real almost responsibility to sort of help students and school leavers sort of transition into work. But I think there's a huge opportunity as well. And I think, you know, that they're mutually, you know, advantageous, aren't they? So what we can do is as an industry to support students, I think it's going to be hugely beneficial. Which, interestingly enough, is a lovely segue into our next speaker. So I'm going to hand over now to Amy at UTC Reading, who's going to talk through a little bit about her experience and sort of viewpoint from the school. So Amy, if I hand over to you.
Good morning, and thanks first of all to Cohesion Recruitment for inviting me to speak this morning. Great to have this opportunity. So yeah, as James said, my name is Amy Sutcliffe. I'm events lead at UTC Reading. We are a technical secondary school in Reading. And I'm here to talk from a school's perspective about school outreach. Now, my first point is that UTC Reading is not your average secondary school. So I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of all secondary schools, but I think our experience is actually relevant for early careers recruitment across the board. UTC Reading is a technical secondary school, as I said. UTCs, there's a network of UTCs, it stands for University Technical College. Each one of them is linked to a local university, but we are actually secondary schools recruiting at the age of 14. There's about 48 nationwide. The reason that we recruit at 14 rather than at 11 is a philosophy developed by Kenneth Baker, the former, now Baron Baker, the former education secretary in the 80s, and he reckoned that students are ready there are a number of students who are ready at this age to specialise, particularly in STEM subjects. So every UTC is linked to industries in their area and the skills gaps that are there. So we in Reading, we're in the Thames Valley, so we specialise in computer science and engineering, but we're also increasing the amount of science that, or we specialise also pretty much in science, because there's a lot of science industry in the area. We're based in the east of Reading. We've got about 45% BAME students. And we've done a lot of work on changing the gender balance within our student body, and it's grown over the past couple of years from about 9% female students to around 18, but there's still a lot to be done there, obviously, to increase that. Even though we're different to other secondary schools, we still face the same challenges in organising meaningful employer engagement activities. And it often starts as a contact with an individual within an organisation, often a parent or a relation of a student, or someone within an organisation passionate about school outreach, rather than coming from as a kind of part of a campaign from early years recruitment within that organisation. And that's not to say that doesn't happen as well, but it is more often the case. With the number of apprenticeships increasing, this landscape is changing slowly, with more companies seeing the worth in school outreach for their early careers pipeline, but there's still a long way to go. From our perspective, the most successful outreach for us is where companies get involved in the classroom. So rather than a one-off say Careers Talk or one-off appearance in college. They come in regularly bringing real-world knowledge into a certain topic, setting briefs that are linked to their real work for students to complete over a number of weeks, or coming in for a project day where they work with a smaller number of students to really get in depth into a subject. What we aim for with our outreach with or our work with employer engagement is for the students to build relationships with the local employers. So if that, that company is mentioned, they think back to experience that they had with one of the employees from that company in the past. And school outreach is essential for this. Students really get to see what it is to work at different companies, and they get a much better idea of what day-to-day life is like and what the culture is like. They see the employees from that company interacting with each other as well, and they get to interact with the employers, which increases their self-confidence when it comes to the application process as well. And basically they experience the real world of work. And it's by far away the best way of providing a talent pipeline into your organisation, especially for those students who might not generally consider jobs in your industry. What we're aiming for is to have employers supporting every part of our curriculum. We've started over the past couple of years with our specialisms, so computer science and engineering, but we're working at getting employers into basically every lesson or every topic, everything that we teach. So that's our plan for the future. I know that for companies, this kind of outreach is difficult to justify because it's slow burn. So, ideally, I think research has shown that ideally companies, particularly for girls, they should be getting to them at to get girls into STEM careers, they should be getting to them at year 8. So that's kind of like 12, 13 years old. And in fact, at the moment we start at 14, but we're looking at adding a year 9 so that we can start at the age of 13, just to kind of get in there that bit early for those students who just wouldn't consider those kind of industries or those kind of subjects, but actually that could be the right thing for them. So this kind of school outreach that we're suggesting, it develops over a number of years. You really develop a relationship with the students, they develop a relationship with you, and every mention of the industry partner's name in college and every encounter the student has with them really just reinforces what they can offer them and the opportunities that are there for them. We do realise, I think everyone in the school community realises that this makes it difficult to prove the advantage that it can bring both to students and to companies, because you obviously don't have that direct recruitment. You're not engaging with a student and then at the end of that year you count the applications that you get from that school, and from that point of view it is tricky to get to secure funding to support it, but it really is, in our opinion, the best way to attract students into your business. Next slide please, James. So just following on from what Becky said about destinations, I mean, again, UTC Reading and UTCs in general are a little bit different in that we do promote apprenticeships, we do provide an awful lot of information, and we have a lot of alumni that have gone into apprenticeships, and generally in the past we've had about a 50-50 split of university and apprenticeship or employment. That has changed, again, reflecting what Becky was saying, over the past couple of years with a decrease in available apprenticeships due to the pandemic and the uncertainty of the job market. So we have seen an increase of students going to university. This slide is an overview of the destinations our students have gone to over the last couple of years. Summer 2021, we had 60% of students going to university, 12% going into apprenticeships, 18% going into employment, which was much higher than it has been in past years, and the remaining 10% of those who opted for gap years, who were still not quite sure what they want to do. These students are also being well supported to find a positive destination. Our industry partners really make us stand out from the crowd, and I mean I can see a number of names there of people who come into college on a regular basis and who are well known to our students. Every school can benefit from bringing real world relevancy into their schools and their classrooms. We're always in discussion with our current industry partners about how we can best work with them, and we're always on the lookout for new industry partners to support and engage our students. that's it from me.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. And I think you made a couple of really interesting points there. I think talking about that kind of slow burn versus sort of quick return, I think is always going to be a critical point. I think, you know, from the organisations that we're speaking to who are delivering, and obviously we're delivering school outreach, there is always an agenda that actually, you know, what is the return on investment? And I think, you know, generically, school outreach should be viewed as a long-term strategy. But I think to counter that, for campaigns that we've delivered over the last sort of year or couple of years, we are actually able to see quite a quick return in terms of both numbers of applications, but also the diversity and mix of applicants coming through. I think you know, for everyone looking, you know, who's joined the call today and looking at that slide there, which is a real who's who of sort of organisations and places you want to engage with. It's a fantastic testament to you and your school and what you're doing. I think the only thing I would sort of caveat that with is, and you mentioned this at the beginning, that is not a norm. That's not a normal sort of schools experience. You know, the number of schools that we've been engaging with over the last sort of few years, they can't boast Microsoft and Vodafone and Cisco and Google and UBS as typical clients. But I think some really interesting insight, and thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. So next we're going to move on to our last of speakers, Natalia. And Natalia, obviously, as I said at the beginning, is sort of early talent lead at Virgin Media. So Natalia, if I hand over to you, I know you've got some slides and some sort of statistics to share with us. So Natalia, I hand over to you.
Thank you, James. So yeah, I'm Natalia, and as James said earlier, I will talk to you about why we did school outreach at Virgin Media, how we approached it, the outcomes, key learnings we found. So last year was actually the first time that we launched a school outreach. There are a few reasons why we felt it needed to become a key part of our overall strategy. The first one was that increased apprentice demand. So historically, 2/3 of our budget would traditionally be spent on graduates, when actually apprentices are a growing area for us in terms of numbers year on year, with new types of apprenticeships being set up every year. Whilst on the other side, the graduate numbers have actually become relatively stable over the last few years. So for example, next year, we've got about 50 grads and interns coming in, but we've got 400 apprentices. So because of that, we felt that we should actually redirect some of the investment accordingly, especially considering the point that Becky was mentioning about the relatively low levels of understanding from students about apprenticeships, as well as the kind of difficulty of that journey. Therefore, arguably needing a bit more specific interventions, perhaps than graduates. The second reason was actually our DE&I strategy. And we know that working with schools, particularly if we target schools in the right way, can really help drive diversity, predominantly when it comes to social mobility. But that, of course, is very strongly linked to ethnic diversity. And it can also help with areas such as female diversity, disability, whatever the organization kind of focuses. And the third reason for us has been obviously giving back to local communities, which is not only obviously the right thing to do, but also makes Virgin Media more attractive to our customers, particularly government organizations, because quite often we get asked to talk about what we do for local communities as part of loud bids and contracts. In terms of what we did and how, the biggest challenge for us has been the fact that our roles, particularly apprenticeships, are spread all over the UK. And considering there are 4,500 sixth forms and colleges across England and Wales, we had to really think about the way we approach this, as traditional ways of doing outreach can be very resource intense. So we partnered with Cohesion to allow a bit more of a flexible resource model for ourselves. This allowed us the kind of to scale up the activity up and down at different times of the year, which obviously we couldn't do within our team itself. And also, as we launched our initiative during COVID, we started off relatively simple. So we focused on phone and email engagement to start, couple that up with 6 webinars with different topics, as well as actually introducing a couple of exciting and innovative tools, online tools for students. So we launched a MatchMe tool, which sounds a bit similar to what Becky was describing earlier, UCAS has done. But effectively for us, it's an interactive quiz that helps students find which apprenticeships from our offering best match their preferences, based on 4 very simple questions. And the idea behind it is, of course, to help students navigate a wide range of apprenticeship options that we offer, but also make individuals consider roles that perhaps they wouldn't have considered before. So for example, a female candidate or student seeing an engineering apprenticeship pop up at the end of the quiz will hopefully make her consider that career path, even if she's not thought about that before. We also launched a situational judgment test, a practice one for schools. The thinking behind that one was that, there was many initiatives out there focused on helping students with their CV writing, their interviewing skills, but there isn't much out there to help with, tests such as an ACE-JT, which are actually currently a huge part of what the recruitment processes are at especially larger companies. The other thing that we've done is we've obviously very carefully considered our targeting criteria. So we made sure that we target schools based on our key business priorities. So we coupled 2 things, kind of the location, so proximity to our key hubs of recruitment, which we had quite a few of, as well as where the schools are on the free school meal index, to identify those schools that needed our support almost the most in that space of social mobility. In terms of the final results, in the end, we reached out to 1,400 schools across 14 main locations, out of which we developed a kind of more in-depth engagement with 500 schools. And we actually found that 43% of our, kind of all of our offers came from the schools that we did the school outreach with, which is fantastic from our perspective. From the perspective of our tools that we've launched, we had over 6.5 completions of our MatchMe tool, and candidates rated it 9.2 out of 10 on average. And most importantly, 100% of people surveyed actually said that they found it useful in finding a suitable role. And then in terms of the practice ACE-JT, over 2,000 students engaged with that test as well. We've had extremely positive response from schools about both of those tools, mainly around finding it quite useful to help upskill their students. And quite a few schools mentioned that they've not seen a practice ACE-JT before, so that was kind of uniquely useful to them. From social mobility perspective, because that was obviously a big driver and a priority for our business, we found that schools with students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds were actually more likely to engage with us than other schools. And that obviously is in great alignment with our DE&I agenda, especially our ambition to level the playing field for underrepresented groups. And so 42% of all engaged schools were actually schools kind of above the 25% on the free school meal index. And that was followed closely by kind of the offers. So 37% of all offers went to the students from the schools above the 25% on free school meal index out of all schools that we targeted. So all of that meant that we actually ended up achieving all 3 objectives that we aimed for, which was driving quality, diverse hires, as well as upskilling, thousands of students and making a positive impact on local communities. In terms of key learnings, to give you guys an idea, firstly, we would recommend considering the timing quite carefully. So going out to schools when you actually ideally have live roles in the local area. because that we found that engages the schools a lot more. And for us, for example, because we get quite late demand from our business areas, we would go live typically between February and June. That's when we advertise, rather than when, you know, you would have maybe that more of that traditional school engagement around the autumn period. And yeah, we found that the schools tended to be a lot more open to conversations when we had the live roles that we could actually specifically talk to their students about. Also, we found that timing of events or anything else that you may do with schools, it can be quite important. So for example, we've made a mistake of scheduling one on a Friday afternoon, and surprise, surprise, this webinar ended up with the lowest attendance levels that we've had across all webinars. So we've definitely learned that lesson. The second advice I guess I would give you guys is to make everything that you do for schools as short and snappy and interactive as you possibly can, whether that's webinars or interactive tools or live sessions or anything. So in hindsight, for example, we probably made our practice SJT a bit too long. We've created 12 practice questions to match our real SJT, which is why we think the completions were actually lower than the MatchMe tool, which only had 4 questions. So for next year, we're going to split the test and do slightly shorter versions for students, because once they got an idea, they know what the tool is about and they got the main learning. And then the final thought is just that once we engage with schools, especially because we've done it at scale, we started receiving a lot of requests to come and do bespoke talks and bespoke engagement in very different ways, which is why we think it's really important to have the right mechanism to be able to respond to those requests. So for us at Virgin Media, for example, we set up an internal ambassador network that we can now reach out to in those situations where we kind of need that extra support that our core future careers team can't respond to necessarily because of time. So that's it from me, and I will hand you back to James.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalia. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to just go back to your slide here with the number of schools and sort of some of the stats that you were able to, you can never kind of prove a concept better than just do it through a few statistics. So thank you for sharing those with us. I think, obviously there's an element of bias because I know, it's delivered by the team within Cohesion, but I think what Virgin Media did in terms of the innovation and what we were able to take out to the schools was absolutely fantastic. So it's great to deliver that last year. And I know there's a lot of, sort of pioneering and sort of new stuff that hopefully we're going to be delivering this year as well. So thank you for taking the time to share that. It was interesting. I had a conversation yesterday afternoon with a professional services firm in London, where we are managing a graduate program on their behalf at the moment. And we started in recognition of this morning's event, and we were starting to talk about school outreach, etc. And I said to them, because they were interested in bringing in some apprentices, etc. And I put it to them very plainly: was their interest purely to get bums on seats in a relatively cost-effective manner, or actually did they have a long-term agenda to develop an early talent pipeline and work with schools and colleges in the area? And it was really, really reassuring that the HRD that I was speaking to just turned back around and said, look, if we're going to do this, let's do this properly. And yes, by bringing on apprentices and school leavers, obviously they are at the cheaper end of the market in terms of salaries and therefore costs incurred by the business. But it was really reassuring just to see this huge, financial services organization genuinely and passionately committed to working with local communities. And also, doing that element of sort of skills workshops and employability training, etc. And I think, again, as we alluded to at the very beginning, by pulling those two different factors together, they're really mutually beneficial. So yeah, hopefully this morning's been interested. We're desperately trying to keep it within the hours timeline today, which I think we've achieved. So thank you everyone for joining, and sort of thank you also to the speakers. I've noticed that there are a series of questions that have been coming in through the course of the last 45, 50 minutes or so. So what I'm going to now do is hand over to my trusty Deborah Edmondson, who's going to sort of manage a few questions and answers, and hopefully we can sort of share some additional thoughts and responses with you. So Debs, if I hand over to you.
Great, thank you, James. Apologies, coughing down the call at you all there as I came on off mute. But yeah, we have absolutely had some questions come through. So thank you very much for posting those obviously into the chat. So first of all, a couple of the questions were around obviously, can you have access to the slides and the recording post event? So just to confirm, absolutely, we will be sending the recording round and also a copy of the slides. But speakers, we've also had a couple of requests. You've all mentioned quite a lot of stats, not all of which were on your slides. So I don't know if there is a possibility that you might be able to give us a little summary of some of the stats that you mentioned, so we're able to send that out with the recording as well. That would be fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, so first question was for Becky, actually from Dawn, who said, can they direct interested candidates from their own website directly to the UCAS website to access some of those tools and help that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. And if Dawn or anyone else on the call wants to contact me to find out, the best links or the best places to direct students, candidates to, please do that. My details will be included within the slides, but more than happy to do that. We've got a lot of content across ucas.com and a lot of resources, so there's different places for different things. I'll also share the link to the career quiz in the chat. I have shared the links to the UCAS reports for everybody, so hopefully everybody can access those, but I'll put a couple of other links in there around the career quiz and the UCAS Career Finder, which is a tool that employers can showcase their vacancies on, and it's completely free for employers to use as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Becky. And a question for Amy from Penny, who asked, is there a template or a set of principles of how an industry partner engages with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a number of ways in which we engage with industry partners. I've just mentioned Career Finder. So we have a partnership with the National Apprenticeship Service, where any level 4 or above apprenticeships are automatically pulled through to Career Finder, which is essentially a jobs board vacancy listing for apprenticeship roles on ucas.com. However, employers can upload their roles directly, which gives them the advantage of being able to put things like logos on there, etc., which just enhance that engagement. It is completely free. Traffic is really high. We get about 1.2 million applications through there every year, and that's only increasing. We're seeing much more demand. We are doing some work at the minute to pull those roles through to the hub, which is another section of ucas.com, so that we can showcase both undergraduate and apprenticeship vacancies in the same place and actually provide that parity of visibility. But that's a project we're working on as we speak.
Okay, fantastic. So there's some guidelines and templates obviously on the UCAS website, and a lot of information and help there. So thank you, Becky. And Amy, from your perspective, from the schools angle, have you got some templates and tools as well that industry partners can?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, we're kind of constantly tweaking how we engage with industry partners to try and make it as efficient and as fit for purpose as it can be. We feel like we were kind of there just before COVID. We'd set up a program that industry partners where the aims were all very clear, and we called it the pipeline program. Industry partners could kind of sign up for it, and that it was very clear exactly what they had to give in terms of time and resources. Unfortunately, everything's been turned a bit on its head, as it has for everybody over the past 2 years. And I've gone very much back to just having personal conversations with each of the individual partners and explaining where we are and what we want to do, and seeing where they are and what they want to do, and kind of matching, whether it be in the curriculum. So really setting students' briefs or talking to them about the topics that they're learning in lessons at the moment, or the bigger projects that we do with full year groups and that kind of thing. So no, I don't have a template or a set of principles at the moment. Well, a set of principles, I guess I do, and I know Penny sent me a message directly to say that she's connected with me on LinkedIn. So Penny, very happy to answer any further questions after this event. But not a framework, as it were. I wish I did, and I think we will get there. It's just that it feels like everything is just constantly changing, and it's very difficult to find a one size fits all.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Amy. And then this one I suspect is probably going to be more relevant to Natalia. Jess has basically asked around the potential barriers. So do you think that maybe the 5 GCSEs, including maths and English, are a barrier to students looking for apprenticeships? I don't know if you came across that, Natalia, in your programme.
Yeah, so we've actually been relatively brave with this, and in line with the social mobility agenda, we've actually lowered loads of our entry requirements. So in the past, typically we would, for example, ask for A-levels for level 4 apprenticeships. We would ask for GCSEs, for level 3 apprenticeships, even level 2. And we've literally lowered everything as far as we could, and then kind of took the decision that we will review and kind of monitor the pipelines and make sure that that doesn't affect the quality. But we really decided to trust our recruitment process, that we're recruiting on potential, and we can add some technical tasks where they're required, if it's a finance role or it's a technical role, rather than rely on a STEM A-level, for example. And so far we've seen really, really positive impact from diversity perspective. So just to give one example, in our network engineering apprenticeship, it is very, very hard to find those female candidates, for example, but we ended up with 3 out of 15. And interestingly enough, actually 2 of them didn't have those higher qualifications that we used to ask for, and they're performing really well now. So I definitely would recommend reviewing that and making sure that you don't put any barriers that you don't need to, and that if you can compensate in your recruitment process, that's a better way, because some candidates, especially from social kind of those sort of backgrounds, will be better at the practical aspect than necessarily the typical academic achievement side of things.
Absolutely, fantastic. Thank you, Natalia. James, I think that probably covers the majority of questions. We had a few duplicates, but I'm going to hand back to you to close.
Perfect, brilliant. Thank you, Debs. And again, on behalf of Cohesion, thank you very much to all the speakers for taking the time to pull the content together and sort of share their thoughts and insight today. So thank you to all the speakers, and also thank you to everyone who's taken the time out of their day to join today's session. We hope you found it of interest and specifically relevance. Obviously, anyone who's interested in finding out more information about what a typical programme might look like, the timelines, the reach, the scope, etc. Please feel free to continue the conversation and pick up with us separately, or obviously please feel free to reach out to any of our speakers as well. So thank you very much, and I will let everyone crack on with the rest of their activities for the remainder of their day. But thank you very much. Bye-bye.